all water, but it's behaving differently. So consciousness is like that water.
Well, the depression is really trying to tell us something about ourselves that we need to change, right?
Exactly. And that's the essence. Let animals lead. Is let them be themselves. And don't try to change that.
Hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. I've got a question for you real quick. Do you ever want your pet's mental health is like? Well, I've got some barking good news then. Today we've got a truly unique guest who embodies the journey of integrating science and spirit. His name is Dr. Jeff Feinman, and he's not only a respected molecular biologist and a holistic veterinarian from UPenn, but his personal health journey with a complex diagnosis paired with his training at Eckhart's Tolle School of Awakening led him to revolutionize how he views symptoms both in people and pets. He's the author of Holistic Actions and the author of the upcoming book, Path to Pet Wellness. So, Dr. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, where are you from? What got you into being a molecular biologist turned veterinarian? Because that sounds kind of odd.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm from New York. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City on Long Island, in Jericho, New York.
Okay.
And in 1975, I had an accident that triggered scary symptoms that weren't diagnosed for 35 years. So for that amount of time, I spent thinking my symptoms were called attacks by my family and friends. So I was thinking that my body was attacking myself. It gave me a good chance, 35 years, to observe what was really going on in my body, and that is part of what molded me and where molecular biology. I think molecular biology came in because I was always fascinated in the way the body works, and the most fundamental scientific way to understand that is at the molecular level.
Yeah.
So that's why I started that, and I always wanted to be a vet.
Okay, very cool. And I mean, you're right. You got to get down to the building blocks if you want to understand how the rest of it works, right?
Exactly. And those building blocks are now shaping the way medicine is practiced. And we'll talk perhaps a little more about scientific wellness and what we can do to rebalance ourselves energetically, mentally, and physically.
Okay. Yeah. So real quick, what kind of scary symptoms were you experiencing? And why did you let them go on for 35 years? Was it like scared to be shamed from the doctor or something? Or
no, that's a great question. One that I was never asked. And the symptoms that started were called attacks because they were neurologic attacks. They were at first misdiagnosed as seizures or something and they couldn't find a diagnosis. Not that they didn't look. Believe me, right away my mom rushed me to one of the first CAT scans that they were doing on kids in the 70s at that time. And no, it took 35 years. So for 35 years, I was told it was all in my head.
Okay.
That's what resulted in my lifelong depression, anxiety, social anxiety, everything in life.
Yeah.
But it also caused me to go inside and try and examine from the lens of a scientist, molecular biologist, what was going on, where I landed.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're trying to figure out your own puzzle of sorts, and in doing so, what was one of the things that was your first awakening moments to it's not all in your head?
That not all in your head. Well, that was the diagnosis. That was the definitive diagnosis made at Columbia University by a brilliant neurologist specializing in movement disorders. Because they have us like early onset Parkinson's or other. He found something called spinocerebellar ataxia, which is a rare genetic disease related to the, again, ataxias and Parkinson's disease, that affect the balance, ironically, the balance center of the brain. So I've been imbalanced physiologically, and I've been working on getting rebalanced emotionally.
That's a great way to look at it. And I mean, that just sounds kind of what everyone's trying to do in a sense, but it sounds like yours was turned on to like level 10 or something.
That is for sure, and I would not recommend them. But the approach of 35 years of thinking it was all in your head and having scary symptoms that entire time. That's one of the reasons why the book started as a science book, to connect the science with what the reality that I was observing. I call my own research.
Yeah.
Did a lot of research. I've now done 50 years, over half a century of research.
Wow.
I still, I consider my body and the body of my patients and all of our bodies as symptom factories, meaning that they really are made, they're designed to make symptoms. It's what we do with the symptoms that results in if we have a good life or not.
Okay.
Can I give you an example?
Yeah, for sure.
When I was at Penn in the 80s, at UPenn in the 80s, there was a psychologist called Marty Seligman there. He described something, psychology, that we now call positive psychology. That is focusing on what Aaron Beck, the psychologist, called the sweet spot, focusing on that instead of focusing on your diagnosis. So depression, anxiety, and whatnot all resolve spontaneously when you focus on the sweet spot. That's what they found. And I found that and corroborated that in animals physiologically because it worked for me as well.
Huh. Okay, whoa. So you're essentially saying that there's a sweet spot for getting rid of just like everything almost instantly, right?
I don't know if I'd go that far, but there is a strategy. There is a very definitive scientific strategy that will help everything right away.
Okay.
And it starts by getting us out of our head, because as I learned after 35 years, it's our heads that cause us to suffer more than our physical symptoms do. So it's essentially a way of reducing suffering through the body.
Okay, so reducing suffering through the body, and that goes back to what you were saying before about our bodies being symptom factories. So if, say, we have depression, for example, the depression is really trying to tell us something about ourselves that we need to change, right?
Exactly. And we know what the really underlying trauma is related in almost every case at some level. Our toxins, what we eat, all that we know is related to our disease burden. But at the underlying root, what we're learning is mitochondria, energy flow in the body. In fact, the concept of flow developed along with the concept of positive psychology, because positive psychology is a way to help flow, to help get into the flow. We know that when you focus on things that you love, when you focus, you get into the neuropsychiatric flow that allows positive performance. We focused on it performance-wise. You get your work done in half the amount of time and blah, blah, blah. But for animals, it also helps them optimize their physiology, their livers and their kidneys. And
So how did you figure out that it worked for animals too? Because like we can't necessarily read their minds and they can't necessarily speak out loud. So they have to really manifest those symptoms pretty outwardly, right?
Right. And those symptoms can manifest both outwardly and inwardly. Symptoms actually are two classes: externally visible, and we'll talk about them in the beam in a minute, and internal symptoms. We measure by blood tests and other diagnostic tests.
Gotcha.
But there's still symptoms. They're all the body's clues of what's going on. It just so happens that the external symptoms that's reflected in the beam are even more sensitive and allow early disease detection more so than the physiological symptoms, which are secondary to that imbalanced energy flow that is reflected in BEAM. BEAM is an acronym for behavior, energy, appetite, and mood, things that we can observe in our pets every day.
Yeah.
All my students, all my clients, they all measure BEAM score. I measure BEAM score. My own doctor asks me, so what's your BEAM? No, because that's really the bottom line. What we're doing here, Keegan, is we're focusing on BEAM and quality of life instead of health diseases and challenges and labels and mind-made stuff that may or may not ever get to be a problem. I mean, I just today dealt with a kitty cat that, they were worried about what might happen. Not the fact that the cat's eating great, purring happy and fine, but what might happen.
So that anxious aspect was keeping everything kind of in a standstill, I guess?
And you could almost say that it was doing more than that our anxious and our worry and our energetic emanations like that actually help obstruct the healing process in our animals. So when we breathe, when we go out in nature, when we are in sync with nature, with our animals, and that helps at every level. We know through the UC Berkeley, the Greater Good Center, Science Center at Berkeley, we know their all walk is going to optimize the body's ability to heal in humans. But their all walk is what I call a therapeutic sniff walk in an animal, because it does therapize the dog or cat or any animal that's out engaging with the environment. There's a lot more benefit than just than going out for a walk. It's the benefit of healing from the earth energy, if you believe in things like grounding or forest bathing or
So whenever we're dealing with these signs and symptoms that a pet may be getting, one of the first things that I'm curious about is how many times is it because the pet parent has that same symptom?
Sometimes. Again, I just spoke with someone today that their pet is mirroring their own disease. Some people might say they're taking it on so you can get rid of it. And that actually is the case in a lot of cases where the pet gets, say, IBD, when the IBD remits in the person.
Really?
And it really points back to the virtue of just getting balance, aligning with the reality of life and not worrying so much. I mean, our animals are amazing portals for doing that, because they are not worried about those symptoms. We are worried about those symptoms. If they have symptoms, they may feel discomfort, they may feel, lameness and whatnot, but they're not worried about what it is. They're not worried about what might happen. They're not worried about what they could do. We are. So the more we can embrace those symptoms like friends, the better off.
So embracing the symptoms, what exactly do you mean by that? Because, I mean, we're trying to stay away from those symptoms, right?
Yeah, that is the ultimate goal, is to avoid the negative symptoms. In my book, I describe something called the silent SOS. It's our animals who are trying to give us an SOS. Stands for significance of symptoms.
Okay.
In other words, those symptoms are clues to what's really going on, and what we need to be doing is using those symptoms as signposts while we treat the underlying energy imbalance. It might be the schedule is off, it might be the food is off, it might be that there's a energetic trauma that needs to be treated with homeopathy or acupuncture, but we need to get to that root, which is reflected by BEAM.
So whenever you're doing, I heard you say a BEAM score earlier. How do you do a BEAM score?
Yeah, BEAM score is from 1 to 10.
Okay.
Where 1 is really like comatose almost, and 10 is like 100%. And we break it down, behavior.
Yeah.
Does your animal want to engage? Do they want to be with you? Do they want to be off by themselves? So does any little noise affect them? Energy is easy. Do they want to go for a walk? Do they want to go for the full walk? Do they walk ahead of you on the walk? Are they actively engaged, looking around with their environment? Appetite, another super easy one. Are they trying to wait to get fed? Do they eat whatever you give them? Do they finish what's in their bowl? Do they lick their bowl? Is food their happiest thing in the world? And M is perhaps the most difficult because that's subjective, but the mood is so often reflected in behaviors. So, if they're anxious or depressed, they're often either clingy or isolating, depending on the individuality of the animal. And the individuality brings us back to what I said at the beginning, which was scientific wellness, which is a paradigm in human medicine it's P4 medicine, personalized medicine, proactive or preventive medicine,
Okay.
active and participatory. So it's the kind of medicine we all want to be part of.
Whenever you're dealing with that kind of thing and you're getting those beam scores, do you I guess it would be kind of good to track those like a journal, right? So that you could see what the animal or your pet's doing lately?
It is really good, and I'm not gonna. Can I show you the book? Or it's a journal. It's the Healthy Animals Journal.
Huh.
Where the beginning of the book, talks about symptoms, but mainly it's a book of blank pages where you can do just what you said, track every day, not only be what we call the early warning signs of disease, and the early warning signs are those clues that the body gives us, physical clues that something may not be right, and it may be as simple as, again, diet or probiotics or schedule, but those early warning symptoms are usually things that are considered to be normal. If you go to the vet, I just a little bit of eye discharge, a little of ear discharge, a smelly coat, dry coat. But that's not the way a healthy animal is. We even got the wrong temp because our animals live in a state, or at least I believe our animals live in a state of low-grade inflammatory activity, meaning that they are more inflamed because when they're successfully treated energetically, their baseline temperature is a little bit lower.
Huh. That's really interesting. I wonder why that is. Do you have a hypothesis on that?
Well, when we get back into balance, everything becomes normalized, and the temperature is just an indication of things not being normalized.
Okay. So, kind of like whenever someone's running a fever.
That's a different scenario.
Yeah.
That's, that's the body's response to a bug, a virus. Another great thing to reframe is bugs. I mean, are bugs, do we get sick from bugs? No, we don't. And that goes back to the terrain versus the germ theory. And I said the inner environment.
Yeah.
And the inner environment, it's just indicative of the balance. And I mentioned that because when Louis Pasteur was developing the germ theory that is now the end-all, it's the basis of medicine. At the same time, there was a theory on the inner terrain called the terrain theory. And basically, it was talking about the balance and something called susceptibility, which is the opposite of resilience, how that is more important than the bug. How we're all covered with staph, we all have strep, we all have fungus. Why are we not sick from that? We all have cancer cells in our body every day. Why aren't we sick from that? Because our immune systems are doing its job, because our immune surveillance is keeping us in balance. But when you're out of balance, your immune system is out of balance and you become predisposed to those bugs.
Yeah, and so that's why it's so important to stay on top of it and everything, especially for your pets, because like you're saying, whenever that SOS shows up, at that point, it's almost a little. It's not too late, but that's where it's like you need to start taking action, right?
And that I'm glad you said that because it's never too late. Truthfully, when you deal with, because we're talking about really the difference between the physiologic paradigm and the energetic paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
Two sides of the same coin of life,
Huh.
but we also know that every cell in the body only is alive because of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Every cell has little energy powerhouses called mitochondria that
Mm-hmm.
generate the energy and allow us to live.
Mm-hmm.
We're finding that almost every disease has a mitochondrial either basis or involvement.
Huh. Really? I've started to learn that there's some real ties to mitochondria whenever it comes to like mental health and stuff, which has been interesting. But it's interesting to learn that other things like that are actually tied to mitochondria. But I mean, it would make sense. Like we said at the very beginning of the episode, you got to go at the building blocks of stuff to understand it. So if it disrupts the mitochondria, then everything else falls out of whack.
Exactly. And then they're studying all this in human medicine. Veterinary medicine is kind of just beginning to delve into this area.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of research. It's mainly human or laboratory animal. Or,
Mhm.
like the stress and trauma research that we apply to people and kids, mainly came from what mice and monkeys, I think.
Mm.
Things like the number of nutrients that you get as a child. I guess we can't. Well, I guess we do have a few studies in kids that were not nurtured that were then predisposed to emotional and physiologic diseases.
Whenever you're dealing with the pets, though, how do you start to get them out of the trouble states that they may end up in?
Well, that's a great thing that we never have to do because they don't consider themselves to be in troubled states ever. We don't need to get them out of there. We just need to follow the rules,
Hmm.
and that will help. If you're asking about those symptoms, let's say a dog is vomiting,
Uh-huh.
they're not worried about vomiting, but they're vomiting.
Yeah, this is true.
Take them out for a therapeutic sniff walk for 3 to 5 minutes and see if they're vomiting when they come back. And if they are, go back out for 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Hmm.
But 80 to 90% of the symptoms will improve or even resolve when you give them a therapeutic sniff walk, a snuff-o-mat, play with them, give them a happy meal or love therapy, or again, something that focuses on their sweet spot.
Mhm.
The sweet spot in dogs and cats and all animals is usually pretty easy to find and employ. So, they talk about eat, pray, and love. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote that beautiful Eat, Pray, Love. But for dogs and cats, it's really eat, play, and love.
Okay. I was just about to say, like, how would that actually kind of equate to the animal world? Whenever we're working with our animals and stuff like that, so they're kind of showing us how we can actually treat ourselves too, in a sense, right?
And that, my friend, is where Eckhart Tolle comes in a couple of years ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I've been studying with him and listening to him almost every day for many years. A couple of years ago, I did his School of Awakening and I'm doing a refresher actually on it in a couple of weeks. He discusses the very same paradigm
Hmm.
from the point of view of people and getting us out of our head. And just today, I heard a talk where he was talking about how physiological health follows secondarily in many cases.
Hmm.
And for animals, it's a lot of keys
Huh.
because we don't do this. We don't focus on self care or positive psychology or anything for animals.
Yeah. Whenever you said hitting their sweet spot, I was kind of like, well, the neurological sweet spot for like people would be finding that safe space of sorts where you can really just be yourself and be authentic and just let loose of in a sense. For a pet, like if they're not worried whenever they're vomiting, they're kind of always happy. That would feel like a sweet spot, but first thing that popped in my head was like scratches behind the ear or something, you know? Would it be something along those lines, or would it be something like you have to take their personality into account too?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that because that brings us to the holistic actions happiness protocol. The happiness protocol is 3 steps, very 3 simple steps.
Okay.
Step number one, identify what makes your animal the happiest. It might be a happy meal. It might be running and playing. It might be loving him up. It might be a snuffle mat. It's pretty easy to determine and employ. And that's step number two is do it more than you already do it. If they're having a challenge, if they're scratching like that, and you're already doing it one snuffle mat a day, do it twice a day, 3 times a day. I'm a big fan of frequent micro engagements every
Mhm,
couple hours. Take them for a 3 to 5 minute walk, a three to
mhm.
five minute game of fetch.
Yeah.
That will break the cycle of the symptom because what it's doing is upgrading the mitochondrial function.
Mhm.
We know that from Martin Picard's work and other human mitochondrial work, but it's upgrading the mitochondrial function, help them flow more smoothly,
Hmm.
operate more smoothly.
Okay. So one of the things that you talked about earlier was a sniff walk, and is that just like any same old route that you always take them on, or is a sniff walk like a little bit different, like something that's new to them?
It could be anything. It could be walking outside the door, it could be walking down the driveway. It really is guided by what the animals want.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
actually, one of our upcoming webinars is going to be from Kathleen Prasad of Let Animals Lead Reiki. And
Hmm.
that's what we're trying to do is let the animals lead. Because really, in essence, Keegan, this method is letting a dog be a dog, letting a cat be a cat, letting an animal be an animal,
Uh-huh.
because we are the ones that impose our rules on them. We make them get shots. We make them put them into menopause by 6 months of age.
Hmm.
When they're allowed to be themselves, as evidenced, for example, by the spay neuter data between the US and Europe, where they don't spay and neuter necessarily, and they don't
Hmm.
have as big of an overpopulation problem because their animals are, they're more socialized in many
Hmm.
areas, better used to interacting with other animals. And that's one of the things that dogs love to do more than anything is interact with the other dogs. My wife is gonna kill me, but I'll give you an example from the dinner table tonight where we're talking about traveling, and I love to travel when I can. My wife hates it and has not been really traveling anywhere for many, many years.
Mm.
Whereas I was just at a retreat with that card a couple of months ago, and I was at a global health conference a couple of weeks ago, and I love it. The new environments, everything is just beautiful. But that's the kind of freedom I mean.
Hmm.
Be able to be happy in that situation is different than being happy when you're at home living, your usual life.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but I really do think that every person is entirely different in their own regards.
Exactly. And for animals, it's really just about one thing, and that is safety. So
Hmm.
they need to be safe. So, you know, animals can feel safe out in the world when many of us really can't for various reasons.
Hmm.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why our most common answer to any question is it depends.
Hmm.
It depends on the individuality. It depends on the context of the whole situation. And that, my friend, is the answer to every medical question that you could ever ask is it depends.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to agree right there because it really just depends on it's literally everything. So like how tall is the patient? How much does the patient weigh? How many fingers do they have? Everything is contextual, and whenever we're dealing with our pets, we kind of, like you said, we impose our rules on them, right? So do you think that we impose our personality onto them, and sometimes they seem to emulate the same personality? Because I know I remember hearing at one point that dogs only want to please their parents, and so they will adapt their personality however it seems to please their pet parent. But I don't know. I'm not a vet.
The answer is it depends on the individual, it depends on the species, it depends on the,
Mhm.
situation. So, yeah, in general, dogs are much more biddable, much more willing to, you know, be with us, that want to be with us than cats that may or may not. But there are cats that their favorite thing in the world is being with people. They greet you at the door, they roll over, they want to be fed, they want to be loved.
Mhm.
You can never tell 'em.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the essence of let animals lead, is let them be themselves.
Mhm.
And don't try to change that.
Yeah.
And that applies to symptoms, by the way. I mean, that is a really, really, really maybe the most important, one of the most important things I would say is that when we oppose symptoms with antis, as an example, antibiotics or anti-inflammatories or
Mhm.
any negative training is a good example of versus
Mhm.
training.
Yeah.
You may help the individual symptom, but you're going to make the overall problem worse in the long run.
Mm. Gotcha.
And I'll stick with the training example of using a shock collar on a dog that
Mhm.
is aggressive and he's behaved until he mauls somebody.
Mm.
They maul them because the underlying process was still there, even though he was behaving up until that point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would really make sense because that would essentially be the exact same as someone getting mad and you telling them to shut up and just bottle it up until one day they just explode out of nowhere.
Ex-
Oh, wow.
ex- exactly. Exactly.
Wow. Ooh, so how would someone lean into the symptom of an aggressive dog? Because usually they're trying to protect someone, right? It depends. So,
So in general, it does depend because they do want to sometimes
mhm.
be protective. I mean, my dog is the sweetest, happiest girl in the world, but if you try to come into her space, she will attack you.
Mm. Okay.
Not partially because she's scared.
Mm.
She's scared that I'm going to be harmed. She's scared that she's going to be harmed. And the most common cause, the most common trigger for aggression is fear.
Mm. Yeah. I would have to say that that really does kind of mimic people too, because I know out of myself and many other close people near me, fear tends to lead to the worst decisions and also leads to a lot of odd and negative reactions instead of responses, you know.
Exactly, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's do we see a symptom and react immediately by going to the vet and getting rid of the symptom with the ear ointment or
Mm,
something? Or do we respond mindfully by reframing that symptom that to understand it in the context of the individual?
okay. Real quick, while it just popped in my head, where can people find you and your upcoming book?
Thank you for asking, and the best place to find me is Holistic Actions with an S.
Gotcha.
Holisticactions.com/book is where they pre-order, get all the amazing bonuses that we've got, including a series of webinars where we're going to break down everything that we're talking about. We just had one about reframing the training. situation. Instead of calling it training, calling it beaming or beam shaping. We're shaping their behavior based on their being, based on the quality of life and happiness.
Huh.
Instead
Okay.
of giving commands or being uh, trainers.
Huh.
We're not forcing things on our animals.
On that note, do you not really condone or like say that it's good to do the normal tricks and stuff with pets, like to sit and shake?
If they like it, then yeah, it's fine to do. And there's a book called Constructing Canine Consent
Hmm.
that talks in excruciating scholarly detail about the benefits of agency, the benefit of consent
Hmm.
in training, in
Huh.
life with dogs, yeah. But it's basically all about letting them do it if they enjoy it, and a lot of dogs love learning tricks. They're so, especially if they get giving treats. If you give them yummy treats, they're gonna. But there are, I mean, I had a dog that not only wouldn't she do tricks, but she didn't respond to any food or treat. She didn't want to play any games. I walked in the room and she walked out. I mean,
What?
she had a
That sounds like a
lot.
cat.
Well, exactly. And she licked herself like a cat. And she was raised with the cat, but she's also traumatized when I got her.
Oh.
God, and that was just one manifestation of trauma in a dog. And unfortunately, my own dog is manifesting another kind of trauma.
Hmm. So, were you able to kind of walk with your dog through that trauma and kind of beam them into being more social, kind of?
Oh my gosh, I have another 2 hours.
On this episode, we've got about 15 minutes left, but we could always get you back on to dive deeper into this rabbit hole.
Or better yet, you can read the book. Read the
Yeah.
book where we talk about how the happiness protocol developed because of what you just asked. Because no. The answer
Mm,
is no.
mm,
It wasn't. And in fact, it was part of what led me to understand more about why we get sick, why they get sick. And that is something called susceptibility. And Fanya's susceptibility was so high
mm,
that she got sick and died. And the only time I was able to make her really happy was when I adopted her dog, who was the opposite of her. And he got her to run and play joyously a few times, but that was it.
man, I'm really sorry to hear that. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, I understand that losing a pet is much more than just a pet or anything like that, and it can be really devastating. So I hope that all those wounds have closed as much as they can, but I hope that you continue to heal in that regard.
Thank you for saying that. And yes, yes.
Yeah.
And what helps the most is another joyous, happy pet that dispels any of the memories. But those memories will always be there. And, there's good evidence that, and now we're getting into the consciousness paradigm. There's good evidence that those memories are actually an energetic reflection of our pets throughout life.
Hmm. Okay, and is that on us per se? Sorry. You said that the memories were the projection.
I got it. Yeah, that was a confusing statement, wasn't it? I'm referring to when you asked me about, hopefully they've gotten over the
Hmm.
loss of Anya, and I said that she's always with me. And what I'm saying is that when
Oh.
you remember a pet that you've lost, they are with you.
Mm, gotcha. Hmm.
And that, there is something called the consciousness paradigm. If you read
Oh.
the new book by Dr. Tony Nader
Hmm.
called Consciousness is All There Is, shows how what I just said is connected to us, connected to mitochondria, connected to happiness. Everything is the same.
Hmm.
And that is a paradigm, Keegan, that has been main paradigm for thousands of years.
That consciousness is everything and everywhere. Yeah.
And that, of course, is something that Eckhart Tolle talks about a lot.
Gotcha. And I mean, whenever we acknowledge that consciousness is consciousness is knocking on the door everywhere all the time, but we don't really always know that we're conscious about being conscious, right? And so here's one question. So we're saying that everything and everyone is conscious, but some people would say that like insects aren't conscious or stuff like that, but that also kind of goes into the whole like spirit or whatnot. I think animals got them. I think that they got their own personality. I think that there's a lot more going on in there than what we really can see. What do you say to that?
I say, here. I'm going to go way beyond what you
Yeah,
just
go
said,
for it.
because not only living beings all have some degree of consciousness, but that rock that you dropped earlier
Yeah.
was I mean, I almost had you just say I'm sorry to the
Yeah.
rock. I mean, I was at the dog park the other day, and there was a little kid just playing, by beating a tree. It's like, oh, don't hit the tree. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I feel so badly.
Yeah, I've been that little kid before too. So
We all have at some point. It imbues everything, and that's the paradigm of Native American culture, of First Nation, of all indigenous cultures throughout the world forever, for millennia.
Yep.
But it was quantitated beautifully by a scientist named David Hawkins. Said naming a book called Power. He has a bunch of books, a book called Power versus Force, where he quantitates the levels of consciousness from fear and hate all the way up to love and empowerment and enlightenment even, and how the level of consciousness that you're at is going to partially determine how you behave. I mean, in rocks, there isn't a heck of a lot of consciousness out there. It's like water. A frozen water, you could have liquid water, you could have gaseous phase water, you could have easy water, which is gel water like in our bodies. It's all water, but it's behaving differently. So consciousness is like that water.
Yeah.
Where Eckhart talks about it as the ocean, and the ripples are part of the ocean, but we don't see ourselves. We see ourselves as individual separated ripples, but we're actually all connected.
Yeah, it's really weird how it all ties together in some way, shape, and form, and it's great to really view that through the energetic links that we can all share. And so we develop those a lot with our pets because we're around them all the time.
Exactly, and that is actually my unspoken intent with the book is, as is happening with me and a lot of people around me, and hopefully with some of my students. So, we're becoming more conscious, more awakened, thanks to our animals. And that's why part of why we say our animals are our best teachers. Every day I say a Thanksgiving greeting to the natural world. And one of the parts of the greeting is relating to the unconditional love, teachings, and inspiration of animals.
Okay, I love that. It's kind of starting the day off with some really powerful intention. So, and intention is all about directing consciousness. So if we're just directing consciousness, then we're really kind of figuring out how to do it.
Exactly. And where intention goes, energy flows.
Yeah, I love that saying. I always forget it too for some reason. I don't it just flows so well together, but I can't remember it. We're able to sit there and direct our consciousness to be more open, I guess, to other consciousness. And especially if we're dealing with our own pets, we kind of need to be open to that because, like you said earlier, with it being part of your memories and stuff, it kind of, I think that's what you were saying is that it becomes part of your consciousness, right? The memories become a part of you. And from there, like you're kind of reborn in a sense. even after a death. A lot of people don't like to think about it that way, but whenever someone dies or something, you are reborn in that moment because you no longer have that person here. So,
Exactly. Wow. I mean, that's a very deep point that we are reincarnated every time that we have a thought or that we think about, something that's coming back into our bodies, which is the definition of what is carnate, but
mhm.
the body. And it happens over and over again. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of it's just weird to think about that. We're always kind of being reborn in a sense, you know.
We are, and one of the few things we know in medicine is that the more things seem to stay the same, the more they're actually always changing. And that's why we call it in science dynamic equilibrium. We're trying to achieve balance, but we're always changing.
Yeah. And that's kind of what you're trying to help do is bring that balance between people and their pets and trying to really just let each one of them be their best self, right?
Exactly. And what that does is raises the bar. It brings up the bonding, the love, the appreciation, the respect that you have for your animals and all life.
Hmm.
There's a beautiful little book I do recommend
Okay.
to everyone called Kinship with All Life. Talks about first dog star, but it goes on to talk about consciousness paradigm in everything. And it brings it all together in it's like an hour, maybe an hour's read. It's realized back in the 50s, I believe, and that's a great little book.
Huh. I've never heard of that. I'll have to check it out myself. Thank you for that. Um, but I've got one question for you real quick before we wrap up this first part, if you don't mind. All right. So, Dr. Jeff, the name of this podcast is Retrieving Sanity, and we explore how living life impacts all facets of our mental health. I said that all backwards, but here we go. Looking at the incredible motley adventures of your life, what does retrieving sanity personally mean to you today? And what's one practice or perspective you believe is crucial for anyone on that journey?
Do I need to limit it to one?
You can do two. How many you got?
All right, I've got a
Yeah,
whole book,
there's a lot.
a whole book's worth. I mean, what we've been talking about are all strategy. I mean, I can vouch for the fact that when I turned 50, because of my mental health, I didn't think that I'd make 60. Now here I'm in my mid 60s, having the best time of my life ever. I mean, it really is the best day ever. I mean, the most fundamental thing I think is the animals. And why do I choose the animals as number one? Because the animals, Maya, for example, is getting me outside, getting me to breathe, getting me to appreciate life in a way that would retrieve, that does retrieve sanity. So that one thing the animals gets breathing, gets gratitude, gets me outside, moving, eating better, wanting to be appreciative of it, the miracle that is our bodies.
Okay. I love that. And what would number two be? Do you got a number two? You said you had a one.
I gave them all together. Number two would be breathing. You can do it without any of the other parts, just by breathing. You can regulate. Everyone can regulate the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system by doing cohesive breathing or box breathing or the physiologic sigh. There's not much that we have control over in our body as far as blood pressure or heart or this or that, but we have control over the autonomic function of breathing.
Yeah.
So yeah, using breathing has been phenomenal. Then there's humming, which is a stimulator of vagus nerve and stimulates, so yeah.
This is awesome.
But we're going way beyond.
I just gotta ask, are there any other any tidbits of information that you got for people and their pets or anything that you want to leave for this episode?
Oh, yes, thank you. It's just one.
Okay.
And that is to know there's a different way, different approach. Every veterinarian conventionally trained, like me, that went to vet school, is only trained in the physiologic paradigm, where symptoms are scary. Work with somebody, you can work with a homeopath. Homeopaths do this, have done this for hundreds of years, to reframe those physiologic symptoms using the energetic lens, which then can be used to modify the symptoms.
Okay. Sweet. I love that. So it's something that can give both a perspective shift and actionable steps to do something if something isn't working.
Absolutely, for sure.
Sweet. And one more time for everyone out there, your website was holisticactions.com, correct?
It was, yes. Yes, holisticactions.com.
All right.
Well, first, a little known fact, and I know we've got to go, but when I started this back in 2015-16, it was holistic options. But then I realized that we need action, not options. We don't need more of it depends. We need action.
Yeah. And
Let's do it together, my friend. That's really what we're trying to do, is start a movement where we do it for the sake of the animals.
Yeah, and I love that because we really need to take care of our animals as best we can, because I think that they are a reflection of ourselves too, you know. And so I do think that there's a lot that we can cover in the next episode, and I'm really excited to see where consciousness and pets really play, because it's going to be interesting to see if we could maybe swap consciousness with our pets one day, right?
And yes, they would be very interesting.
I guess we can cover that in the next episode.
Yes, exactly.
So with that, thank you, Dr. Jeff, for being on today. And everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And remember, if you've got a mental health crisis of any kind, you can dial the number 988 and they will give you help. And if you are part of the LGBT plus community and you need help, then you can dial our friends up in Canada and they will help you out as well, because 988 just got stupid for some reason. But with that being said, we're going to leave this episode here, and you folks know what I'm going to say. You got to love yourself. Try to love others if you can, but you got to love yourself first. And with that being said, we'll see you next week. Much love.
Bye. Thank you all.
Shalom.